Hi, I'm Dr. John Demartini, and you can catch me this week on The Jesse T. Show.
Dr. Demartini, welcome to The Jesse T. Show.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yep, it's been a pleasure to learn about you and your work, and we share some common connections with Mark Victor Hansen and his wife Crystal, and they said amazing things about you, and I was intrigued because of your background and all that you've done. So for the 5 or 6 people on planet Earth that haven't heard about you, give us a little context on who you are and what you do.
Well, I guess you could say I'm an educator. I've been researching and teaching in the fields of human behavior for 48 years. And I pretty well, until this year, now I'm on Zoom more than anything, I traveled around the world speaking. I think I've spoken in 154 countries around the world, doing whatever I can to share whatever research will assist people in different walks of life. Anything to do with maximizing human awareness and potential and helping people live extraordinary and inspired lives is what I've been up to. And that is in many areas. It could be in education, it could be in corporate government. I've been blessed to interact with people in all walks. I started out as a learned disabled street kid, a high school dropout. And I nearly died when I was 17 years old. And I was blessed to meet an amazing man at 17 that turned my life around. And that was the first time at age 17 I ever thought I could be intelligent. I was told in first grade I would never be able to read or write, never be able to communicate effectively. I actually had to go to a speech pathologist from age 1.5 to about 4. And I had a deformed arm and leg and had to walk with braces as a child. And so I was a street kid, literally a panhandling kid on the street. And but this gentleman one night in 1 hour named Paul Bragg, who inspired me, turned my life around and started me on a journey to learn how to read. I didn't read till I was 18.
Wow.
So at age 18, when I found out I could read, I've never wanted to stop. And I've devoured, over 30,500 books now. And I'm constantly researching and trying to share with whoever will listen, which has been quite a few. Discovered, and I try my best to be of service to people. So that's what I do, and I love it. I do it 7 days a week.
I love that whole context and narrative you shared, and it hits home with me very much so because I'm a poor kid from Boston. I didn't actually panhandle, but I grew up without things like heat in the winter, which wasn't fun, limited food. But thankfully, I had some powerful people around me. And like you said, it's led me to a place of service to be able to show up for others and pour into other people because I've taken in, like you, enough information where by default, you start to be able to kind of give it back. And so How did this person that was so profound find you? How did you find him?
I nearly died of strychnine and cyanide poisoning when I was 17. And a lady found me. I was living in a tent at the time. And a lady found me and found out I was unconscious for 3.5 days. And she found me and tried to help me and took me to a health food store and bought me some decent food. And on the leaving of that health food store called Vim and Vigor on the North Shore of Oahu, out near Haleiwa, I saw a little flyer on the door of a yoga class. And somebody said, you need to take a yoga class to have mind over body because of what the strychnine does to you. And I, something intuitively said, go to this class. And on a midweek night, I decided to go. So I hitchhiked down to Waimea Bay area. And lo and behold, I walked into this little Sunset Recreation Hall where there's about 35 people sitting on a wooden floor on little towels and things. And there was this elderly gentleman who began to speak. And every word was gold. And I just thought, wow, he was speaking to me that night. And that was the first time that I thought that maybe I could overcome my learning problems and someday become intelligent.
Did you, in that evening, walk up to him after class was over, introduce yourself or connect, or was it kind of a process to get plugged into him?
Well, no, what happened was he at the end of his class, he said, every day at Fort DeRussy on the other side of the island, he has a class every morning. And he has a little class on health and well-being. And so what he does is he does some stretching, and then we went jogging with this guy, try to keep up with this guy. And then he'd do this class, and then he'd give us some fresh fruit, and that was it for the class. And so every morning for the next 3 weeks, I took advantage of that. I literally hitchhiked across the island at 5 something in the morning just to make sure I could spend time with this guy, learn from him. And it was on the 3rd week that he said he was leaving for California. And I thought, wow, this is the last time I'm going to get to see him. So I never had the courage to walk up to this guy until I saw that he was about to leave. And the last day after everybody left, I walked up to him and I said, sir, you said the other night at Sunset Recreation Hall that whatever we set our minds to would become our destiny. And I said to him, I had a dream that night that I wanted to become intelligent and someday be a teacher. And he said, well, that's exactly right, son. I said, well, sir, I don't know how to read. How am I going to be a teacher? And he looked at me with a smile and he says, that's not a problem, son. You have any other problems? And I said, no, sir. He said, I want you to say this one thing to yourself every single day and never miss a day for the rest of your life. He said, I want you to say to yourself that I am a genius and that I apply my wisdom. And he made me say it over and over and over again right there in front of him and patted me on the shoulder when I said it where it made sense. And I started saying it. And 48 years plus, I've never missed a day. Now, I can tell you that I eventually picked up my first book and tried to read it, which I was not successful at. I eventually flew back to California, hitchhiked back to Texas, and took a GED and miraculously passed this thing. Purely guessing and saying that I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom, thinking that that's somehow going to make some sort of difference. And somehow I passed this test. It was mind-boggling. But then when I tried to go to school, I failed. And I asked my mom, what exactly is a genius? She said, well, people like Albert Einstein and Da Vinci. I said, well, then get me every book that's been written about those two guys. I want to learn about that. And I failed. And when I failed, I was crying because I thought maybe this whole thing is an illusion. Maybe I better go back to just surf. Because I was riding big waves on the North Shore. And I was crying there, and I'm thinking I was having a real dark moment. And my mom came home from shopping, and she said, son, what's wrong? What happened? She saw me crying. She hadn't seen me crying since I was a kid because I left home at 13. And she said, what happened? I said, Mom, I blew the test. I guess I don't have what it takes. I guess I'll never read or write or communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far. I was apologetic to her. And she said to me what only a mother could say. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, whether you become a great teacher and philosopher and travel the world like you say you want to do, whether you return to Hawaii and ride big waves like you've done, or return to the street and panhandle as above, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do.
Beautiful.
When she said that, my hand went into a fist, this determination fist. And I saw the vision that I saw the night I was with Paul Bragg, which is painted in my office today, of me standing in front of 1 million people speaking. And I said, I'm going to master this thing called reading and studying and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching and healing and philosophy. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. I went over and hugged my mom. I went into my room. I got a Funkin' Wagnall's dictionary out, which is the only dictionary I have. And I made a commitment to read 30 words a day and memorize them and spell them and use them in a sentence and understand the meaning. And so I started memorizing the dictionary until my vocabulary, my mom would test me on 30 words a day until my vocabulary was strong enough to pass school.
Wow.
And once I did, I started escalating. And before I graduated from that school, I was at the top. I was determined. And I never stopped. Because once I learned to read, and then when I turned right before my 19th birthday, weeks before it, my mom said to me, what do you want for your birthday for Christmas? Because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. I said, well, Mom, I want the greatest teachings that have ever been created by the greatest minds who ever lived from around the world. And she said, "You sure you don't want a t-shirt?" I said, "No, Mom, I want to." And she said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." She called her brother, who was my uncle Ralph, who was once a professor at MIT, who's a physicist and chemist, an engineering background. He, as a gift, sent to our house on a big flatbed truck 2 giant 6x6x6 foot wooden crates filled with thousands of books.
Wow.
And it came to our house and brought in stacks and stacks of books in my room and left this little yoga mat in the center where I could do the sun salute in the morning. And then I read all day. And I'd go to class, read on the way to class and read on the way back. I lived reading. And I guess I've been doing that all these years. Great minds book, sit down and after a while in an hour, or if you read fast enough. So I realized I could escalate and leverage by standing on the shoulders of other giants. And I wanted to find the most universal principles, most universal laws in every one of the disciplines. I made a list of all the disciplines known, all the ologies. And then I made a commitment to read 100 books in each one because I figured that would be like a PhD in them.
Sure.
And I wanted to be learn the laws of the universe enough where I want to have a foundation of knowledge that people can rely on. And so I've been devouring everything I can get my hands on in every field, all related to the evolution of human consciousness and the mastery of life. So I've been relentless in that for 48 years. And I still do that every single day today.
Such a powerful illustration of you had your PhD before you became a formal doctor. You were poor, hungry, and determined. And you didn't have any option other than to create your own world. And that became empowering once you started to learn how to speak and became less frustrated with reading and started being enamored by reading. And then the teachings and the wisdom of all the different, like you said, ologies and laws of nature and psychology and human behavior. And this is the type of stuff I geek out on, man. I'm big into, exploring. And if you could put Indiana Jones and Doctor Strange together, that's probably who I would be. Yeah. And so learning about everything I can and growing up, I had a very vivid, still do very vivid imagination and thirst for learning. It's one of those things where just the journey itself, regardless of what you've done in your life, the journey is the prize, the walking through and the experiences. And so as you started getting this information and you started picking up ideas and started forming your own and kind of getting curious, what was kind of shaping for you in terms of your career path around that time when you started getting smart, honestly, getting intelligent, getting curious?
The first thing that happened, I'm still 18.
Yeah.
I'm in a library at Wharton, and a 375-pound Afro-American woman came up to me and asked me to teach her yoga because I was doing yoga on the floor behind some bookshelves in the library.
Nice.
This big woman who I thought, no way, was my first student. And she was a very inspiring Afro-American woman, but she could never even bend over and touch her navel hardly. But the point is that She wanted me to teach her yoga. And I was so grateful that somebody would ask me for information. That was like a dream come true. So she became a student. Then a Persian gentleman came and saw me meditating, and he said, well, can you teach me how to meditate? And that was my second student. And then about 16 or 17 kids came into the library one day and asked if they could sit with me and discuss mathematics with them, because I was learning mathematics at the time. Basic. I mean, it was just algebra, but they were interested in it. And so I started tutoring. It wasn't long into school. Once I started, if you do 30 words a day in a month, that's 1,000 words almost. And after a while, in a few months, you start having more and more vocabulary. And every word I would go in a dictionary or book that I didn't understand, I was devouring that and writing it down and writing the meaning down. I made a ritual out of it. And so by the time I graduated from the first little school, I had a following. And then when I went to the University of Houston, you do yoga under the trees, and people would just sit and, watch this, because it was not as common back in those days, back in early 70s. And they would start asking me questions, and I would gather 100, 150, sometimes swelling to 400 people would gather and ask questions under the trees.
Wow.
Daily. And sometimes if it rained, we were in the cafeteria. They'd follow me in the cafeteria. We do it there. And then when I went on to professional school, I taught 7 days a week. I taught every day. I got to place out of some of the classes in school and teach them. I got to teach neurology, embryology, pathology, and things, because I always try to be a year ahead. Whatever I knew I was going to be studying the following year, I'd try to read it in advance so it would be just review.
Yep.
And that paid off, because that allowed me to pay my way through school. And I'd started teaching classes, and it was $20 a night for a 3-hour class every night. So I'd get up at 2-something in the morning, do some yoga for 30 minutes, and then speed read. By then I developed speed reading capacities, and I started reading for 4 hours. I'd read 4 to 7 books. And then that afternoon or evening, I would do my presentation on whatever I read. And I kept a repeating thing, because I learned that the faster I give it out, the more I retained it.
Okay.
And then I started doing that, and that led to local classes and health food stores and local schools, and then in the evening events. And then when I got out into practice, I started continuing that. And I ended up having my own TV show and radio shows. And I started doing that back in 1982, 83. And then I just kept going. Went from there to around the city, and then eventually around America. I mean, I think I did all but 2 states with presentations, and then I started going to Canada and Europe, and now I've been to 154 countries speaking. Never stopped.
Incredible journey, and just this monster, this beautiful monster that was building inside of you for this thirst for learning. And as someone who does teach and educate, it's because I'm a student first. And when you teach, you reaffirm your learning. Yeah. You become a better student. You grasp the knowledge deeper in a more intimate level. And it's one of those, it's almost like a circle of life where, it just, you continue to learn, continually teach, come back to learning. As you're going through this and you're starting to expand and go through the world, what are some of the things that you're learning through your business and through your entrepreneurship journey and through your speaking engagements? What are you picking up, and how's the world shaping you at this point?
Well, I learned that a thing called equanimity. And this is not new. This is something that you can trace back to the ancient Greeks even. Anytime you exaggerate yourself and minimize your employees or customer and project assumptions onto them and don't meet their needs, you'd be humbled.
Yep.
Pride before the fall.
Yep.
It's a hubris. And anytime you minimize yourself to your employees or to your customers, you'll create an anarchy and a self-depreciation, and you'll undermine your profits. And neither of those are sustainable, because they're not authentic. They're exaggerations, pride, or minimization, shame of the true you, the authentic you. And I call one careless, where you care less about them than yourself, and the other careful, which you're walking on eggshells. And the thing that lasts and sustainable is the thing called caring. And caring is the willingness to honor your own values and to discover and honor the individuals that you work with and you're serving in a way that you're providing a service that inspires you, that also fulfills their needs, their values. So when you can communicate what you value in terms of what they value in an equitable way, and have equanimity within you and equity between you and them, you create a sustainable winning combination. And so I believe that every symptom in a business is a homeostatic feedback mechanism guiding us to authenticity, trying to teach us how to be the most profound, most magnificent individual we can be. And many times we misinterpret the symptoms of the business. But I really believe that every thing that's going on in our business is a feedback to guide us to either bring ourselves down from pride or bring us up from shame, and to allow us to be authentic so we have integrity. And I think it's easy to say, have integrity. It's easy to say, be yourself. But I really believe that if you don't master the ability to internally govern yourself, which is the executive center, the executive center, which is the prefrontal cortex, the forebrain, uses GABA, which is inhibitory transmitters, and glutamate, which is a stimulatory. And they regulate the amygdala and keep it from going into subjective biases towards seeking or subjective biases towards avoiding things, which are distractions to the business, which distort reality and make you proud or shamed.
Yep.
And it's governing that. And if you don't govern yourself from within, you have nature forced into governing you from without. And leaders govern from within and followers are governed from without. So I really believe that the symptoms of business are guiding us to live authentic, integral, self-governed, masterful lives. And every area of our life, our physiology, psychology, sociology, theology, business, every area of our life is literally offering us that feedback once we understand things through the eyes of wisdom.
Self-awareness and humility. Being able to identify and be your own mechanic, as I say, and see where there's things that need to be whittled down or streamlined or improved or dialed back. And then having the humility to say, I don't know everything. Let me go learn this from somebody else, or, ask for help kind of thing. You mentioned before in your conversation, consciousness and awareness. And that's something that I'm really heavy into and my own personal journey. I'll be in Peru in a month from today, working with some sacred plant medicines and a Shipibo tribe of shamans that have been doing this for, decades. And for me, it's raised my consciousness. It's raised my awareness. It's helped me become a better human. I've worked on ego. I've minimized the pain body, like all these different things. And it's allowed me to show up better for myself so that I could show up better for other people. I've heard you talk about consciousness. How was your consciousness awakened, stoked, and inflamed? What were some of the things that you experienced to get where you are?
Well, when we infatuate with something because we're letting the impulses of our amygdala dominate our executive function, we become conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. And as a survival mechanism, we have false positives. So we use false positives to survive because it's better to assume on an error that it's there, even if it's not, than to assume that it's not there if it is. Because a predator can eat you, or you can get away, the prey can get away from you otherwise. So we have a subjective bias with our impulses and instincts, seeking and avoiding. And if we are infatuated with somebody, this subjective biases makes us conscious of the upsides and unconscious of the downsides. And every time we judge something with a conscious and unconscious split, we're not fully conscious. We're not mindful. So what we've done is we've divided the house, and it doesn't stand when we divide it. And we have a skewed subjective bias, a confirmation bias towards the positives and disconfirmation bias towards the negatives. And we're not seeing what's actually there. We're seeing our limited hallucinative reality. And the same thing when we resent something. We're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. We have the opposite thing. And now we have an instinct to avoid it instead of an impulse to seek it. And anything that we have these biases on, anything that we're conscious and unconsciously split in our perceptions on, it occupies space and time in our mind and runs our life. And it's stored in our subconscious mind and causes epigenetic alterations in our physiology to create symptoms to let us know that we are not seeing what's actually there. We're seeing our hallucination, our false reality, our elusive living in the cave of Plato's thinking. And so we have an intuition that is constantly trying to make us aware of the unconscious, to make us fully conscious. Our intuition is a negative feedback system trying to guide us to become aware of what we've been unaware of and we're ignoring and unconscious of. So if we're infatuated with somebody, the intuition is trying to say, too good to be true, keep your eyes open, there's another side. And if we resent something, there's got to be a purpose and meaning why this is happening. So our intuition is constantly trying to bring us back into authenticity. Because if we infatuate with somebody, we're too humble to admit what we see in them is inside us, and we minimize ourselves. And if we resent something, we're too proud to admit what we see in them is inside us, and we exaggerate ourselves. And we're again not our authentic self. And our intuition is trying to get us back to our authentic self. And the moment we're back in our authentic self, We have a confirmation that we're authentic because we have tears of gratitude, an inspiration, a path of inspiration. And the tears of gratitude are confirmation that we've now gotten authentic because we're now graced by the presence of what is, not what we assumed was. Now, there are many approaches to this awareness through the ages, thousands of approaches from various schools of philosophy, from, as you say, plant-based to non-plant-based. But I believe that the greatest pharmaceutical industry is not outside us, but it's inside.
Yep.
I've been studying neurochemistry for 43, going on 44 years. I've studied all the neurotransmitters, regulators, neurohormones, every signal molecule in embryology. I've studied everything that I'm aware of. I try to keep up to it. And the ratios of our perceptions initiate various ratios of these transmitters and regulators and modulators, and signal molecules. And I'm absolutely certain that you could take any one of those molecules and increase and decrease it with conscious awareness. I worked on that when I was in professional school, and we did biofeedback systems to be able to change transmitter relations. We have the greatest pharmaceutical factory inside us, and we have the capacity to change our ratios of perceptions by asking questions that make us aware of things we were unconscious of. The quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions we ask. And the greatest questions are the ones that equilibrate the mind and bring us back to authenticity. And when we do, our neurotransmitters do its job. And they reward us with an unbelievable fulfillment and creative genius for bringing solutions to humanity.
What are some of those questions that you could ask?
Problems of perception.
Yeah. What are some of those questions?
Consciousness is the game.
100%. I mean, it really is. And learning how to, quote unquote, hack yourself, hack your own life and spirit and optimize those things. Go into the questions that you could ask to alter those perceptions and to effectively change the narrative of your life. What are some of those questions people can ask themselves?
Oh God, you got a couple thousand years?
Yeah, hopefully this life or the next.
But when I'm resentful to somebody, let's say I perceive somebody demonstrating or displaying a trait, action, or inaction that I judge foolishly as a challenge more than support, and I resent it. I first ask the question, what specific trait, action, inaction do I perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that I despise most? And it can be on the other side, what I admire most. It can be either way. Because I'm avoiding it or seeking it, which means I'm not poised. I'm poisoned by my misperception. And then I ask, go to a moment, and I'm talking to myself now, go to a moment where and when I perceive myself displaying or demonstrating this same or similar specific trait, action, inaction that I've despised most in them. Where have I done it? And I get present in that moment and I ask, where was it? When was it? Who was I demonstrating it to, and who perceived me doing it? So I have reflective awareness and transparency to myself. And I go and own that until I'm 100% quantitatively and qualitatively equal to what I see in them. Because as long as I am too proud or too humble to admit what I see in them inside me, I'm not being authentic. I don't have a level playing field. I have them below me or above me in pits or pedestals, but not in my heart. I have to have the laws of similarities that weren't described in order to have them in my heart. And that's what true intimacy is, the realization that whatever you perceive in the others is you. Because we only resent things in people on the outside that represent parts of us that we feel ashamed of on the inside, vice versa on the admired. So what we do is then we hold accountability. We hold ourselves accountable to look at the reflection, because the moment we own that reflection, instead of judging them, we humble ourselves. Then I go to a moment where and when I perceive them displaying or demonstrating this trait. And at that moment, and from that moment till now, I ask, how specifically is their displaying of that trait? Serve me. What's the upside? Because there are no inherent good or evil traits. Absolutisms are narrow-mindedness, not full capacity of thinking. So I ask, what's the upside to this? If it is here on the planet, it must be serving or it would have gone extinct. So what's the upside to it? And then I go and dig and I get accountable and look for it until the equal upsides are balancing the downsides, until it is neutral And then I realized that I had been an illusion. I had a subjective bias in my misperception. And I was holding myself back from my authenticity. And so I do this for two benefits. One, I get to be authentic and liberated and not having internal conflict and turmoil. And I get to be present. And I get to love another individual representing a part of me that I'm now appreciating. So I neutralize it. Then I go to where I've done it and I go find out how it served the people I've done it to. Because otherwise I'm carrying around self-minimizing shame unnecessarily because I didn't reflect and look again. Then I go and look at where does this individual do the opposite trait. So I don't mislabel them into thinking they're always that way because nobody's always one-sided.
Right.
There's no such thing as a nice person or a mean person. There's a human being with a set of values, and if you support them, they can be nice. If you challenge them, they can be mean. We're all tigers and pussycats. And then I go and I find out at the exact moment when they do the behavior, who is doing the opposite behavior to me to keep me balanced. Because as long as I'm addicted to support, I'll attract a challenger. If I'm addicted to protection, I'll attract an aggressor. Whatever I'm addicted to, which keeps me juvenilely dependent, I attract its opposite to set me free, to be back to being empowered again. So I go and look for the opposite because as Heraclitus and Anaxagoras and many other great philosophers said, there is no one-sided perception until you subjectively delete something from your awareness. So I always look for the other side. And when I find it, I'm brought into a poised state and very grateful and humble because I realize that the person that I'm resenting is my friend helping me liberate myself from my dependency on my fantasies. And then I go at the moment that they did this behavior, if they had done what I fantasized, the opposite behavior, what would have been the drawback to me? Because as long as I'm addicted to the fantasy in the first place, I'm going to keep attracting that which makes me break my addiction. So those are the first 7 questions. I have about 80 questions that I use to bring myself into equanimity and help myself reach a state of autotaxia, an ancient Greek understanding of poised, centeredness. Now, we can do that biochemically, can play with chemistry, but we have the capacity to do that within. And we also have the capacity to do our breathing mechanism because as the breath wanders, so is the mind. As the mind wanders, so is the breath. So if we master the breath, which we have control over our diaphragm, our throat, and our locking of the other end, you might say, we have the capacity with our breath to change the ratios of our breathing and change our neurochemistries and bring us back into authenticity. So those who have governance over themselves and governance over the breath can do amazing things in their contribution in life.
This whole time I've had this inspiration and thought to talk about breath work this whole time, while you're speaking, because I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm getting the context and the practicality of the questions and the ideas and the thoughts to ask yourself, but what's the setting in which you can drop into a good place to be able to start asking yourself those questions? And the first thing I was going to ask you was, is there a breath work associated with this? Is there a mindfulness? Is there a space that you're creating where you can really kind of just be and not be affected by outside influences? What is that process outside of
Years ago, when I first moved back from Hawaii, I stopped in LA before I hitchhiked back to Texas. And I caught up with a buddy there. And I used to be in a band. I play harmonica in a band.
You've had a hell of a life, brother.
I have had a crazy life. But he decided to take me to King's Hall. There used to be a place called King's Hall in Long Beach area. And we used to play there. They used to have 4 bands playing in this giant warehouse and with a big bar in the center of it, blocking the sounds of all the bands so you could go to any one of the bands. And I decided, because I was learning meditation, I decided to go to King's Hall. This time I had no interest in drinking or partying or anything. I just sat in there and decided I was going to meditate to transcend the influence of any of the noise, because that would be a great place to see if I could do it. And I realized, and later when I was around 18, 19, and when I was doing meditations, I realized I could take heat and make it cold.
Yep.
I could be out in 100-degree weather and I could make myself imagine I'm in ice. And I realized that the external world, you can let it run your life or you can use it wisely to create what you want in it. So you're a creature or a creator. You're a creature of your environment or a creator of your environment.
Yep.
just like you're a follower of a culture or a creator of a culture. And so it doesn't matter the environment. The environment has nothing to do with anything. You can be sitting in a sacred temple, a mosque, or a thing, or whatever, or a rock in the ancient geoids place or something.
Sedona.
If you give that power, then you depend on that. But it doesn't matter, because inside your mind, you have the capacity to be, as the yogis say, an infinitesimal or an infinite. So it doesn't matter what's going on around you. Once you realize that, you have the capacity to take whatever you're perceiving and neutralize that perception, get centered no matter what the environment. So I didn't want to let the environment be my factor. Because as far as I'm concerned, the universe is my playground, the world is my home, every country is a room in the house, and every city is another platform to share my heart and soul. It doesn't matter where I am or even what time of day it is, because I work 24 hours a day sometimes. It's what you decide to perceive it to be. William James said the greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings can alter their life by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. We have control over our perceptions, decisions, and actions, nothing else. So if we have command over our perceptions, our decisions, and our actions, then the external world is insignificant. Now, the way we do that is we have the capacity to change our breath, ask questions to make us conscious of the unconscious, to change our perceptions, and to prioritize our actions and to fulfill the most highest priority actions that serves most effective and efficient the greatest number of people on a daily basis. If we do that, we have amazingly fulfilled life. Doesn't matter what goes on. Corona, Saint Corona, it doesn't matter what goes on. There's always somebody that's taken a challenge and turned it into an opportunity because of this view.
100%. And I've even seen that in my wealth management business with clients where they were prepared. We had them prepared. And, when this pandemic came about, we were well positioned to take advantage of it. You see, there's a lot of wealth transfer that happened over the last 12 months. Some of the biggest companies got bigger, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, all these companies got stronger. And so
I can't complain about the last year. It was the biggest year I've had since 48 years.
Right. And I agree. I personally and professionally, it's been one of my best years. And it's sometimes I don't want to say it's hard, but you don't want to brag or boast because you don't want to kick people while they're down, but it's been a great year, all things considered.
Well, the thing is if we care enough about humanity, I was speaking at a church one time and I said something shocking. I don't think they asked me back because of it. but I said, if you're poor, it's because you're not caring about humanity. Because if you really cared about humanity, you would go to some other human being, find out what their needs are sincerely, and get out of your redundant story about being a victim of your history, and go become a master of destiny by contributing in equitable ways. Because when you do, your self-worth goes up and you value you. And if you value them and you value you, you have sustainable transactions and you transform this poverty, pardon me for that.
Yep, you're fine.
thought that was all. This poor poverty into opportunity. And when I said that at first, they were like, whoa, wait a minute now. I'm poor and I'm a good person. It's not about morality. It's not about, the moral hypocrisies that people get trapped by. It's just simply, are you caring enough about another human being to make a contribution?
Yep. And believing that what you can bring to the table is value, No.
What's in it for them?
Right.
What's in it for them?
Right. What's in it for them, and the value that you're delivering them has, it's meaningful. I
had a lady that was attending one of my classes on relationships one time. And she says, Dr. Demartini, what do you do when you're dating a guy that can't make a commitment? And I said, there is no such thing. She said, what do you mean there is no such thing? I said, there is no such thing. A human being is committed to what they value most.
Yes.
And nothing else. And if they perceive that you are not the most valuable thing, they're going to go where it's more valuable in their perceptions. They're going to try to do the most effective and efficient decisions to go. So what are you offering him? I put it back on her. She says, what do you mean, what am I offering her? I said, well, are you the most intelligent, most educated, most inspired, intellectual, individual? She goes, well, no, but I started a year of college and then I didn't finish. I said, do you have a massive business? And are you contributing on vast scales of serving great numbers of people and have business savvy? She goes, no, I work as an assistant. Do you have vast fortunes and wealth? Well, no, I'm in debt, $30,000. I said, are you most stable in relationships? Or are you going in and out of relationships? And she goes, well, I've had two marriages and hopefully the third one. And are you socially savvy? You're hanging out with the movers and shakers and A-list? And she goes, no, I live in a small town. And are you physically fit and super sexy and super hot and a 10 on the Richter scale? And she goes, I do pretty good there. And I said, are you inspired by your life? And you making a massive contribution and on a mission? No. I said, then what about this guy? He seems like a successful guy. He's got $11 million. He runs a major business. He's got a big ranch. He's highly educated, everything else. I said, you're infatuated with him. You're wanting, and whoever's the underdog always wants to hurry up to close the deal. But if they find out before they're, that they're dealing
so
with
true. That's so true.
I said, you're minimizing yourself because you're comparing yourself to others. So as long as you don't recognize your magnificence, and as long as you think he's up on a pedestal, you're going to want to hurry up and rush this. And then you're going to repeat the cycles you've done with these past fantasy relationships you've gone after. She said, boy, you're crude. And I said, I know, I'm trying to hit you with reality here. So I said, the only reason you're minimizing yourself is because you're comparing yourself to others. If you're a cat and you're expecting to swim like a fish, you're going to beat yourself up. If you're a fish expecting to climb a tree like a cat, you're going to beat yourself up. Whoever you are is magnificent, but you're comparing yourself to others and not honoring and recognizing your magnificence. And so let's go and spend a bit of time doing that. So I sat with her for 2 hours, helped her realize her magnificence, stopped her from comparing this thing to other people, found out his downsides to level the playing field a bit, because he was up on this pedestal. She was blind to the downsides, blind to her upsides, leveled it out. And the moment she leveled that out, she wasn't in a hurry. Flee, they follow, they flee.
Yep.
She backed away all of a sudden and started thinking, you're right, maybe I need to make sure this is the right guy. Well, they went off to lunch and they walked right into a jewelry store, and he got a $28,000 diamond ring, engagement ring, and proposed to her. Unexpectedly. And I finally, when I came back in the room, I said, what the hell happened to you, buddy? What did you hit a wall? Did you run into a wall? What happened to you? He said, Dr. Demartini, when you were talking to my girlfriend, for some reason, I started to feel that you were going to talk her out of being with me. And for the first time in a year, I didn't feel smothered. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, whoa, what happens if she leaves? And I did the exercise you said and found out the blessings of her. And then we just walked out and it just happened. It wasn't something that I had planned. It just felt natural. We came by a store, we walked in there and we decided to look, and I just felt it was just somehow natural. And I said to her, when you minimize yourself to others, you'll be desperate. When you exaggerate yourself to others, they'll be desperate. But when you actually honor yourself, they're going to be wanting to be around somebody who's authentic, and that's a magnet to people. Because everybody wants to be able to display that. If they get around people that are that way, they appreciate that. So as long as we exaggerate or minimize ourselves, how are we going to love ourselves? And how are we going to expect other people to?
Comparison's the thief of joy, brother. It absolutely is. And people that, it's interesting, the push-pull in relationships, any kind of relationship, whether it's a business relationship and you're a salesperson chasing a client, right? And you're kind of pushing them, but you want to attract them and you want to pull them towards you. Same thing for relationships, romantic relationships. I couldn't say it any better than you said it, you crushed it, but just with people who are not happy, they're not showing up for themselves, they're not authentic, like you keep hammering. That's most of the issues with people just becoming more attractive, becoming more successful, becoming, happy. It could lead to their happiness. And so another thing that people view as happiness, which we both know isn't true, is money. Money doesn't make you happy. You're happy. And then the money is a tool to be able to live well and have time and have freedom and change lives. And so I'm in this space as a profession, but really what my business is a wealth management business, but behind it, the Trojan horse is consciousness awakening and showing people how to live well and be happy. Right. And it's just the financial planning is the tool. And so, you are very, adept in this space as well. And in my book that I'm writing is 10 steps to become wealthy happily, essentially. And you did it in 6 steps. And so talk a little bit about the 6 steps to becoming wealthy and how that played out either in your life or how you've seen it work in others.
Well, I have the opportunity and blessing to travel and speak. Now, recently it's on Zoom, but it was, in front of audiences. And I was in South Africa in 2012 or 2013. And there's about 5,000 people. And I asked, how many of you would love to be financially independent? And every hand went up and their feet went up.
Yeah.
And I said, great. I said, now I want everybody to look around the room and notice that it's 99 to 100% of the room's got their hands up. I said, now, how many of you have right now passive income exceeding active income and you're working only because you love to, not because you have to, and they have financial independence? All the hands went down except 7. And I said, now I'm making a point here that 99.99999% of you live in a fantasy about financial independence. And only a handful have actually obtained it. Now, I'm going to do a little exercise here to prove to you why, because there's a reason why. I'm going to give you 1 minute, 60 seconds. So you're going to get a piece of paper out. You're going to write down, if I gave you 10 million US dollars right now, I want you to write down, you have $10 million and you have 60 seconds and you have to write down the 10 things you would do if you received $10 million right now. What would be the 10 things you would do immediately in the next 60 seconds? Write it. And everybody's scratching as fast as they can, these 10 things. Stop, minute's up. Now turn it to the person on your left and calculate how much of the money that they started with is now left in assets versus consumables that depreciate in value. And it ranged from 20 to 80% in 1 minute was spent on consumables that depreciate in value, which means that they have a hierarchy of values, not for asset accumulation and building, but for immediate gratifying consumables for the lifestyles of the fantasy rich and famous.
Yep.
And 38 major celebrities right now are going bankrupt because they have a lifestyle, not asset accumulation mentality. So I said, now, once you now have this realization, just realize as long as you have a value on consumables that depreciate in value, you're not having money work for you. You're going to be a slave to money all your life. And you're going to be addicted to immediate gratification and not long-term asset accumulation. As one friend told me one time, if it's exciting, you probably screwed up. If it's boring, you're probably on track with wealth. And I said to him, now, if you don't have a value on wealth building in the hierarchy of your values, the hierarchy of your values dictates your financial destiny because it tells you how you're going to spend your money.
Yep.
When money comes in, the hierarchy of your values determines how you're going to spend it. If you have a high value on your children, your money's going to go to your children. If it's traveling, it's traveling. If it's buying shoes, it's shoes. But if it's asset accumulation, you're going to buy assets. And until you buy something that goes up in value that puts money in your pocket, it's not going to work for you.
Yep.
I said, so, and there's no moral issue here. It's none of it's right or wrong. Everybody's needed in the world doing whatever they do. But the question is if you have a fantasy of trying to be financially independent without the values that will lead you there, you're going to beat yourself up because you're now expecting yourself to do something you're not going to do because your values are going to make your decisions. Every decision you make is based on what you believe will give you the greatest advantage or disadvantage at any moment in time. So now let me give you something that might shift the values so you increase the probability of eventually accumulating some assets for yourself. Anytime you take the action steps that have proven to accumulate assets and link them and stack them with associations in the brain where they're of greater value to you, more advantages and disadvantages, when the why is big enough, the hows take care of themselves. You'll increase the probability of doing those actions that are proven to work. So I said, there are a number of things you can do. You can go and make a list of everything you've ever felt shamed about, guilty about, that you thought you screwed up on, and make a list of them and find out how it served the people involved. To clear the shame, because shame is the number one thing that makes people feel unworthy of receiving and holding on to an asset. And then I said, now, name a billionaire. They said, well, Richard Branson, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. Name one that hasn't built a business that served ever greater numbers of people. In the book of Wealth by Hubert L. Bancroft, it said very clearly that the people that became the fortunate in history over the last 7,000 years are people that felt by divine providence and human sovereignty a desire to fulfill and serve great numbers of people, ever greater numbers of people. If you don't have a work ethic and a service ethic, and you're not caring about humanity to go out of your way to find out the needs and do what you can to directly or indirectly meet those needs, where are you going to get this money to start with to build wealth? So first is writing down 200 benefits of building a business that actually serves people, directly or indirectly. If you don't want to run it, get somebody who knows how to run it, but do something that serves. Number two, 200 benefits of managing that business directly or indirectly in an effective and efficient way to maximize profits. If it's not managed effectively, you could be having $1 billion business with a 1% margin. It has to be effectively, efficiently managed because that's the way you give customers the best price and employees the best fees, best, salaries. And that's how you get the best people. So you have a responsibility to be effectively managing that business, which means to prioritize what you're doing, to hire people that are engaged, to find out what's meaningful to them and make sure the job allocations match that meaning. And you have to care about humanity again. Can't avoid that. You have to care about the customer, you have to care about the employer, otherwise there's no business. The third thing is 200 benefits of saving an ever-progressive portion of the profits. Because the most powerful companies, the Fortune 100 companies, they all have 40 to 100% of the gross income in cash reserves, some sort of liquid reserves. So they reduce the volatilities and swings of the company to stabilize it, because people who manage their money wisely attract more money to manage. So 200 benefits of actually saving an ever-progressive portion, which means that every quarter you're raising that and creating a bigger demand into a savings and a security where you're not having any volatility. So you don't have to work. You're doing it because you're loving it. And you draw and magnetize people that manage their money wisely. You get higher quality clients the moment you manage yourself. And the fourth one is investing in 200 benefits of investing in ever greater degrees of leverage and learning how to go up the scales of classes of investments and handle higher degrees of quotients of volatilities and be able to have a stable system, a trench of money that's based underneath it and build layers by layers by layers where there's no way you can lose money, because wise people make sure that they don't let the world on the outside interfere with what they're building. And the next one is the 200 benefits of actually having a reason for accumulating wealth. Because if not, the second you get financially independent, you'll buy clutter, you'll buy crap, you'll flip a house. A quarter of your house is what you fill up with depreciables, believe it or not. You buy $1 million house, 250,000 of it goes to a garage and closets that fill up with stuff that depreciate, which is a sign of going backwards, not forward. Stop and reflect on what you actually spend your money on. People who are cognizant of where their money's going are more likely to get ahead financially. And the last one, the sixth step, is creating a financial cause that leaves a legacy. Because if you don't have a greater the cause, you're not going to have a legacy. And the legacies give you meaning. Because financial independence is nothing. It's an insignificant accomplishment. It's an it's a small little nothing compared to what you could do with the contribution. Because fulfillment doesn't come from just having plenty of money. Fulfillment comes from using it wisely, serving people. Because we all go to bed at night knowing we made a difference in people's lives. So what is it you're going to do? Because the magnitude of space and time in your innermost dominant thought will determine the level of conscious evolution you've attained. Seneca said you measure an individual by their most distant ends. How big a vision do they have? And that's where a legacy, because as you have zero money, you add $1, the value is 100%. You have $10, you add $1, it's 10%. $100 is 1%, 1,000, 0.1%, a million, 0.0001%, a billion, 0.00001%. So as you accumulate wealth and money goes up, the value of the additional dollar becomes toilet paper. And so you don't have a motive. So if you don't have a greater cause going up faster than the devaluation of an individual dollar, you'll plateau and buy clutter. So you have a responsibility of serving a spiritual calling to master the material ends. So those are the six steps to wealth that I found common to the wealthiest individuals. And I demonstrated that in about 100 people that have been billionaires.
Incredible, brother. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's it's powerful. You got excited about it. You're really energetic about delivering that message. And it's 6 steps. And it's one of those things. It's what do you do now when you have the information? You know, you have to go to the gym and work out, eat right, and surround yourself with positive people to live a healthy life. But are you going to show up and do the work?
Well, the thing is if you don't value something, you don't.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why I research every single day and teach every single day, 7 days a week, not because I have to, because I love it. When you find the thing and when you look at what you spontaneously do, that you're inspired to do, that you don't need to be reminded to do, and start structuring your life according to priority, doing a service and contributing, and from that pathway, you'll never need motivation again. Motivation is a symptom, never a solution for humanity. I don't need to be motivated. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm an inspired man wanting to educate and pass the torch of information from standing on the shoulders of great minds through history. And I find that by doing that, it makes a difference in people's lives. And I'm very grateful for that. And finding what that is in life and sticking to the highest priorities. If you fill your day with the highest priority actions that inspire you, it doesn't fill up with low priority distractions that don't. If you fill your day with challenges that inspire you, that you want to solve, which is fulfillment, the secret of genius and creativity and wealth, your day doesn't fill up with problems that don't. The key is to prioritize what you're doing and living according to what's truly meaningful to you if you want a meaningful life.
Brother, in the interest of time, man, I would be able to talk to you for another couple hours easily. There's a lot of stuff that I still wanted to dive deep on. And so there have been guests that have come back on in the future for another episode. I'm going to throw that invitation out now for the listeners and the viewers that are hearing this. I would love to have you come back on, but let me be the first of those listeners and viewers to say thank you. Number 1, for who you are. Number 2, for the I would call it the medicine that you're deploying into the world to help people, to work with people, to show up for people. Keep shining your light, brother. He is the amazing, the mighty, the powerful Dr. Demartini. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.